thankful for this opportunity to be here and to talk about something that I'm really passionate about. I've been in workplace training for well over 10 years, at least. And one of the things that I love to do is to go into workplaces and try to help make things better. A lot of the times we're dealing with the humans, which can lead to what I would call pinch points. It's not necessarily full-on conflict or anything like that, but dealing with the humans causes us to, have to try a little bit harder from day to day and to make friends. I support several different organizations and work throughout the province. Most recently, I've spent some time in Nelson House supporting people that are getting ready to enter into work, and even just yesterday spent some time at a foundry. And so my work takes me all across the province in a lot of really interesting industries and workplaces, and what I would call the whole cast of characters that we deal with in different workplaces. Today's session is called People, Power, and Process, and mainly because one of the gaps that I've noticed throughout this time is our ability to connect with humans, and really they are the power that drives our workplaces and our workforce. I have a few things that I've curated for our time together today, and of course I can leave some time for questions as well, or even just your own comments and experiences. I truly believe, and this is as cheesy as it gets, but I truly believe that we learn from one another, our experiences, the good, the bad, the in-betweens, all of it. I'll take all of it. So our people, power, and process, I would just like you to think about for a moment how many times you've seen, whether it's you yourself as a leader or other leaders that you've had in your life, they came into that role because they were really good at their job. And we do this, don't we? We promote people based on their technical ability. It has nothing to do with their ability to connect with the humans. It's really, we build these clickers, we work in manufacturing, all of us together, and because I'm the best and I'm the fastest at it, I now am in charge of people who build these clickers. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when we really stop and think about it. So yesterday with this group of characters that I was with, they were talking about this very thing. I've asked them, and I usually ask this question, who's your replacement? Right? Who's gonna take over for you? For a variety of different reasons, right? And so I had asked this question to one of the workers who's been there going on probably 25, 27 years. I said, who's your replacement? And he said, I've been thinking a lot about this, actually. And it's not who you might think it is. And I said, okay. He's like, yeah, I have a coworker that I've worked with for 20 years, very skilled, very talented, really this amazing person. I think of them as wizards, right? These are maintenance people that fix equipment. And anybody remember MacGyver? Like, they're using bubble gum and a shoestring to tie things together, right? Like, that's essentially it. And he said it's actually this new guy who just moved here from Ukraine. He's been working with us for about 6 months. I want him to be my replacement. I said, okay, well, why? It's like, he's got a positive attitude. He's willing to try. He's willing to learn new things, and did similar work back home, but has now taken those skills, talents, and abilities and is applying them here in our workplace. And maybe because he's a bit of a workhorse too, in the sense that, he starts the day early, rarely takes his breaks, this sort of thing. I'm like, well, that's not always such a good thing, but I can see your point, right? That he's willing to be there, he's willing to try. I came across another similar situation, not so much about replacement, but I asked this company, they do kind of like restoration work where they repairs and home stuff and painting and all this sort of thing. And I asked them about their recruitment. I said, how do you find people? And the owner said to me, I've stopped hiring for skill. Do I really want you redoing my kitchen? She said, yeah, I've stopped hiring for skill. I'm like, okay, why? Because it's a lot easier to teach skill and a lot harder to teach kindness, connection, interacting with humans, and especially since we're putting them usually into somebody's home. So we want to maintain our reputation as being people who care about people. And so we'll teach the skills. And by the way, sometimes people come with skills that aren't so great, right? Yeah, you've worked in this industry for so long, but maybe too long, or you haven't had, a moment of continuous learning. And it takes me to my friend who has 3 kids, and the same package that I got as well, the 2 boys and a girl. And her oldest son, she put him into a private school. And it was really going super well for him. He's nerding out in there. He's learning different languages. He's this amazing bass clarinetist. And so she thought, okay, well, my second son, it's just going to be so much easier. We're going to have to work really hard to pay for it, but it's going to be easier if I put both my boys into the same school. And then she thought about it. She's like, gosh, I'm going to have to do an interview. And I know what question they're going to ask me. And the question that she was most nervous about happened. The principal looked at her and said, tell me about your son. Describe him. And like a CBC Sunday night movie, this montage came of how terrible her kid is. He is not very good at math. He does not like to write. He refuses to ride a bike. I know, I tried. My thighs were burning, right? Holding the back of the seat. Come on, you got it. Just stubborn as the day is long. And so she's thinking like all these terrible things about her kid. And then all of a sudden, the other side comes in. Like she's now receiving these other messages in her brain about how kind he is, how he's quick to bring a Kleenex if she even sniffles. Here's a stomach growl and he's made a sandwich for her. He cares for animals, right? He connects on a level with people that's a lot different than the smart, studious bass clarinetist son. And she turns to the principal and says, he's my kind child. And the principal understood what she said, could read between the lines, and said, I will take one kind child over 80 smart kids any day of the week, because it's a lot harder to teach. And so we think about this idea of people, the humans, how do we get along with them, and processes. And many times I've heard leaders say, I don't really get along with them because of their personality. That's not an option, friends. You're a leader, we figure it out, right? So to say, well, I don't get along with them. Why? Have we not spent enough time with them? There's something, I don't know, my mommy taught me there's something good in everyone. And little 6-year-old Kerry's like, but what about people that kill people? She's like, even those people, right? Everybody. And so just kind of give you an idea of where we're headed today. We're going to talk about management. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about emotional intelligence, what I call the F word, feelings, right? And then, of course, continuous learning. Now, this is a big quote, so I'm going to step back just a bit. Sorry, Mike. It says, leadership and management are 2 distinctive and complementary systems of action. Now, when I think of leadership, I think of people and heart. When I think of management, I think of process, boring stuff, documents, policies, right? Gross, barf. But according to this quote, it says that they're complementary, which is interesting, isn't it? So it says each has its own functions and characteristics, activities. Both are necessary for success in an increasingly complex and volatile business environment. This quote was before 5 years ago, by the way, so like even more so now in the way that we've changed a lot of the way that we work and communicate. Strong leadership with weak management, I want everybody to pay attention to this one, is no better and is sometimes actually worse than the reverse. So I showed this quote to my husband last night. He's like, wait, what? He's like, but I thought leadership was everything. I'm like, it is, but also management. So if you have crummy processes, it doesn't matter how great of a leader you are. It doesn't matter how talented your staff are. if you have crummy processes, they're like literally standing in the mud, right? And it slows people down. I'm a speed person. I like to get things done fast. I like to move on. I'm not an accuracy details person. It is never on my resume, has attention to detail. It's not there, unless it's like font sizes. I might be able to notice the difference. Or if something's not quite centered, I have that detail. But the rest of it, not happening. And so when I look at this and those policies and processes and all of that kind of like ew stuff, we actually need it. So sometimes actually worse than the reverse. The real challenge is to combine strong leadership, strong management, and use each to balance the other. And don't worry, I have a little triangle picture coming up. That was by, I don't want to run off on him here, John Kotter, right? Leadership author and professor of organizational behavior at, I don't know, just a school called Harvard. Maybe we've heard of it. So yeah, write his name down. If you're not familiar with John Kotter, lots of great information on the interwebs from him. All right. So a few things I've seen over the years. Some of these plagues that we have in our workplaces, and maybe you've worked in this workplace as well, where we have dysfunctional communication. I was saying this, I don't know when it was, maybe yesterday, we were talking about how we communicate in workplaces has become mainly through writing. Have you noticed that? We're actually all authors, and yet I would guess that many of us are writing for ourselves. Like, think about the last email you sent. Did you really sit and picture the person who's receiving this? Did you think about what their needs might be? I'm going to take a big wild guess that many of us grew up with this idea that we should treat people how we want to be treated. This is how I want to be treated. You better make that font a sans serif font. Please burn and light a match to Time News Roman, right? Like if you're writing for me, that's what you'll do. You'll get rid of all of those kind of fonts. Now, the truth is, if we're treating everybody the way that we want to be treated, we're going to have a problem. Because it's actually a really selfish way of being.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm so sorry. Your earrings are banging into the
Oh,
microphone.
that's what it is.
That's what it is. Now
Oh, well, my earrings are so cute, though. We don't want to take those off. Thanks, Mike. So we think about that, right? How many times have you written an email, a document, a text, and truly thought about how this other person is going to receive it? I'm guilty of that. Why? Because of speed. And it's not that I don't care. I do care, but maybe I didn't have a sandwich that day. Thank goodness we're being fed here, right? Like, we all should have those high blood sugars and be feeling really good. So dysfunctional communication, also people to people. And who hasn't brought home to work? I know I have. I've got a lot of teenagers in my home. It can be stressful, right? Plus my own age is also stressful. And so, we end up sneaking in our issues and bringing them to work, okay? The next one, outdated policies. Well, according to our respectful workplace policy, I'm like, oh, can I see it? I don't know where it is. I don't even know what it says, but I know we have one. And we've got some nice vinyl up on the wall, but do we actually believe it? Do we actually live in alignment with those values? Do we know what our mission and vision are? Because that stuff is like not just a cute workshop to attend, but stuff that can actually be our compass, be our direction. All right, lack of resources. Who isn't doing more with less? I can't think of anybody, right? That we're all just like flushed with lots of really talented people and cash and time. It's not really happening. Trust issues. Don't get me started. This will be like a 3-hour rant without even taking a breath. I'm a trust first. And again, I think it goes to my value of ease and speed. I would way rather know that I can trust you than sit here and analyze and go, guy seems kind of sketchy. Like, I don't know. I better wait. And what are we waiting for? And this word earn is a real challenge for me personally. I hope that we are not expecting to earn respect, but that it's like a baseline of human decency. It's just where we start. Trust is tied to respect. It's not the same thing, but when we have low trust, our productivity slows down, and guess what? Our costs go up. And if you're interested in that and you haven't read this book yet, Stephen M.R. Covey, so Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People Families, they had a baby and named him Stephen Covey. And Stephen Covey Jr. wrote a book called The Speed of Trust. And in it, he tells us that trust acts like a tax in our organizations, where if we have low trust, we have low speed and high cost. But the good news is that the reverse is true. We have high trust, high speed, and lower costs. Think about some of the most effective teams you've been on, whether that's at work, your orchestra in high school. Yes, you are with the principal bassoonist of the Thunder Bay Symphony Youth Orchestra, circa 90-something. So a sports team, whatever team you're on, your family, I guarantee you that that team is effective in part super effective in part due to trust. Because when we trust people, there is no suspicion, there is no second guessing. And so people will say, well, I don't believe you, and I'm not going to trust others. And I'm like, okay, can you send me a survey in the mail so I know how to get to that trust with you? So when we have low trust in our organizations, it is also a plague. Now, this next one, insufficient training. This might be a bit of a bias as a workplace trainer, right? This might be my bias here, and I'll admit that. But often people have insufficient training, right? It could be training on communication. I was talking with Mike earlier about some of the work that I do with people that are newer to Canada or new to the workplace, right? It's not that they're not packed with skills, talents, and abilities, but how do I fit into Canadian culture, which, man, isn't that a loaded statement? Canadian culture, Canadian workplace culture. I remembered this time that I was taking culture and diversity train the trainer, so I knew how to teach it. And it was a week-long training that we had, and every day our trainer would change the room around. Sometimes he would do it while we were out for lunch. And you know how we get comfy in our spots, right? I set up my little nest over here, and this is where I'm gonna plant and live. And you come back and it's like, my bag's now over here, like what? And he did it on purpose. He wanted us to feel so out of sorts and so out of place. And then people would talk about their traditions and their family, and I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, like we would drive around and look at Christmas lights, and my mom would yell at my dad to slow down so she could look in the windows and see their furniture. Like, is that a tradition? And so other people, you know, we're so lucky to live in a province where the whole world lives here, and so people are talking about their amazing foods and things like that, and I'm like, yeah, my mom made popcorn every night, and you know, I just couldn't see my own culture. And so I went up to this guy, Paul, and I said, Paul, I'm really out of sorts. Like, I feel really ungrounded. I leave here every day really questioning who I am. And he had the biggest smile. He's like, yes, I've done it. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He said, sometimes the culture hides itself from the person within it. And like some of you, you're like, what? That was me. I was like, what? But instead, I didn't go, what? I went, oh, that's awesome, thank you, right? I had no clue what he meant until I went to a workplace and they started talking their workplace language. Even though it was English and I understood the words, it made no sense. And they're so stuck in their own culture that they can no longer see it. And then I went, oh, that's what he means. I'm so stuck in my own culture, I can't even see it, right? And so it made sense to me that the culture hides itself from the person within it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he was like a wizard, right? I was like, what? And so I feel like that's another truth that we have. When there's insufficient training, people don't know how to behave. Or when I landed an office job and I start eating around 10:30, I crack into my lunch then, you got your hummus and your crackers and stuff. And over the cubicle wall, my coworker says, Kerry, just so you know, we eat lunch together in the lunchroom. So I'm not watching ghost hunters on YouTube by myself at lunch, right? She's like, and we eat at 12:30. Okay, well, I'm gonna chew both my arms off by then. Oh, and by the way, we don't talk about work. Okay, so I have to people at lunch with people, not about work, at work. Okay, I can do this. And I tell you, we are the most effective team that I've ever been on. And I think part of that was spending time. Many times I'm in workplaces and I'm the only one sitting in the lunchroom because everybody's sitting at their office, maybe watching ghost hunters on YouTube or something, I really don't know. But there's a lack of community, right? We're seeing that. And then a lack of social awareness, which really ties all of this in. So how do I fit into the workplace? Can I communicate with others? Can I set aside my own selfish needs to ease the experience of another? Lou Bayer is, she's actually born in Saskatchewan but lives in Winnipeg and has set up her entire empire on civility. And I think of that social awareness. If we can ease the experience of another, that's one of her definitions of social intelligence and civility. We're so much further ahead, right? It's our ability to connect with others. And so what are these symptoms? Misunderstandings, people not showing up. People showing up, presenteeism, people showing up but they're checked out emotionally and mentally. They're just like holding space in a chair. To me, if you're dealing with other people, that's actually more difficult, more challenging, more damaging than not showing up for work. So if you're there and you're checked out, maybe take a day. Resistance to change, but this is the way we've always done it, we're not gonna change. Anybody remember Blockbuster? Have you heard the story, right? They have this company approach them, these people come into the boardroom and say, we have an amazing idea and we want you to be a part of it. And they're like, that sounds really dumb. Who's gonna wanna sit at home and have movies streamed into their home? We are an experience. And this little company called Netflix was laughed out of the boardroom. Yeah, that's what I think of. High turnover, so if we're seeing people, this revolving door, low morale or apathy, and especially our passionate people. I've been there where I was micromanaged. Not a good thing. The people don't like to be micromanaged. In fact, another fellow you might want to check into is a guy by the name of Daniel Pink, like the color pink. And his teaching, I prefer the YouTube, reading takes a little bit of time. But his book on the surprising truth about what motivates us, called Drive, I think it's Drive, the surprising truth about what motivates us. Guess what? Newsflash, it's not money. Because you can make money at any job. But what motivates people? Autonomy, purpose, and mastery. So if we have folks that are apathetic, they've lost their drive. But the good news is that's not your problem. We'll get into that in a sec. And even just disengagement, right? We said that with that presenteeism. These are symptoms. These are not the problem. And don't we do this sometimes when we're going to problem solve? We're like, let's put a Band-Aid on that symptom and not actually get to the real root of the problem. These are symptoms, these aren't the problem, okay? This is our new life, this is our matching tattoo, okay? So we look at this is from the Jim Clemmer group. So Jim Clemmer, website.com, search up management versus leadership and you'll see where I stole this stuff from on this article, Management versus Leadership. He talks about this idea of people, processes, and tasks, which we now know as management, technical tasks, and leadership. And too bad that P didn't stick on the end, right? So if we look at this, people are at the base. They're the foundation of what we do. And we said earlier, if we have poor processes, this won't matter, right? That our people will be stuck in the mud. I think of muskeg. If you're familiar with muskeg, that stuff's like quicksand, right? And then we have our own technical tasks. So our role is to essentially get out of the way of people. A friend of mine that I was coaching through a job change went to their new job, okay? And they had come from a place, a workplace where things were being slowed down by redundancy, poor processes, like all of this stuff. And there wasn't a lot of room for growth. And they were feeling apathetic, less than caring, kind of grumpy actually. And came to their new job, and their new boss said to them, look, I don't know nearly as much as you do when it comes to technical stuff. And they're like, wait, what? But you're my boss. Yeah, but here's the thing. My role is to remove any barrier so that you can be exactly who you were designed to be. And we're so thankful you're here. Because guess what? You come with 17 years of experience, and you're full of knowledge. And sometimes we're so stuck in our own culture that we can't even recognize it. And that was the truth for this worker person. They didn't even realize anymore how much they knew till they step into a new position, a new role, a new organization. And to hear somebody say, look, your boss, look, I don't really know everything that you know, but I'm going to get rid of any barrier, right? It's like, holy, that's combining that whole triangle of our processes, people, and tasks. So Indra Nooyi, former CEO of Pepsi, said, leadership is hard to define and good leadership even harder. But if you can get people to follow you to the ends of the earth, you're a great leader. And that's such a cool quote. It's true, right? Think about the leaders that you've admired in your life. I guarantee you went the distance. You weren't looking for an extra handout or anything like that. You just did it because of your admiration for that person and your belief in them, and most likely their belief in you. So when I think about leaders, this is true. Your title doesn't make you a leader, it makes you a boss. We need to know the difference. And part of that is understanding for ourselves, our own values. Are we business-minded? What are the abilities that we have? And skills? Skills mean we can get better at something, right? And then, of course, are we a continuous learner? And I would say, yeah, because you're here. But I wanted to share with you a couple of continuous learners I've had in my life. This is my gran on my mom's side, and then this is my dad's big sister. And just the way numbers play out sometimes in families, they were born around the same time in the 20s. My grandmother has passed on, but my Aunt Barb is still around, turning 99 in May. And so let me tell you about my grandmother first. She grew up near Poplar Point, just outside of Portage, and I don't even think she finished elementary school, okay? So she didn't have formal education. She was the oldest of the family, and is this guy still working? And had to work, right? She worked on their farm and did all of those things. A continuous learner, somebody who looked to get better at a lot of different things. Then we have Barbara. So I was thinking about my Aunt Barb. I've had a lot more time with her than my grandmother. And I was thinking about what makes her cool. Because my Aunt Barb is really, really cool. A couple of years ago, 97, my cousin is building a camp along Lake Superior. So Aunt Barb was there, and what was she doing? Well, what every 97-year-old is doing, peeling cedar logs. That's just what she does. Back in pandemic life, she was turning 95, kind of in a significant year. I think they all are, but when you get a little bit older, they seem a little bit more precious maybe. She sends an email to the family and says, you know guys, we're in lockdown here. She lives outside of Toronto. She said, it'd be great if we could do a Zoom birthday party for me. You know, Aunt Barb, you're right. It would be really cool. So we did for 95 and 96. And sadly, at one of them, she ended the party early. Why? Because her friend showed up at the door with beverages, and she had to go. And so I think about that. Like, why is Aunt Barb on Zoom? Why is she on social media? Why does she FaceTime? She does all of these things, and I thought about why, because she's a continuous learner and an early adopter to change. She gave up her driver's license, she passed the test, and then handed them the card and said, here you go, I'm not gonna be driving, I don't wanna be a menace, right? She anticipates change. And so I have to take a step back and I go, okay, but why? Well, she was a teacher, right? She was a teacher, she's a mom, she was a wife, and during a time where you didn't really do all of those things at the same time, right? Remember, she's almost 99. She's been around a while. So then I had to take a step back and I went, okay, but why is she this way? Like, why is education important to her? Why is continuous learning? And I look at my grandmother. I didn't know her. She was born in the 1800s, my grandmother. And she also was educated. She was a teacher as well. Okay, but why? Somebody born in the 1800s, a teacher, an educator, because we take a step back to Sarah Jane Drake, who said, look, I have 12 kids, 6 boys, 6 girls, all of them will be educated. And they were. Every single one of them had a career. And I go, wow, it's not just that education. Like I said about my grandmother, she doesn't have the formal education, but both continuous learners. And so for us as leaders, not only do we do it for ourselves, but hopefully we share that with the people that we serve as well. All right. Good old Simon Sinek, right? He said leadership is a choice, it's not a rank. We land these jobs as leaders probably because we were good at our technical tasks, right? But it doesn't make us a leader. It's a choice. So I wanted to just take a moment here to think about somebody who's been a leader in your life. Formal, informal, what made them awesome? Okay, so think about that for a second. Is it maybe some of the stuff we've talked about? And it can sometimes bring in feeling, right? Maybe we're thinking about the ones that weren't so great too, right? We can learn a lot from them as well, what we will never, ever, ever do again. But sometimes it's just really taking that time to think of effective leaders. So I know I talk a lot about my family, but another person that comes to mind is my Uncle Brian. So my Uncle Brian, this is my dad's baby brother, he's a bit of a wild card. Okay, I wish he was here right now. He'd probably get into a squat and show us how to go down a hill really fast on skis, because he was a ski coach for over 50 years. People who went to the Olympics, his own son, my cousin, was in the World Cup circuit and Canadian men's downhill champion and all this stuff, right? From Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and coached people that even Paralympians and this sort of thing. Why is he such a strong leader? Part of it is internal motivation. He strives to get better at him every day. Maybe not all parts of him, because he is a bit whacked, I gotta be honest with you. So when he called me up a few years ago, he said, I've been thinking about our camp on Tukini Lake. Tukini Lake is just outside of White River, Ontario. Now let's talk about White River for just a second. White River is a short 13-hour drive east along the Trans-Canada Highway, known famous for a little bear called Winnie the Pooh. So everyone talks about Winnipeg, and I'm like, well, look, the actual bear came from White River. So Harry Colborne stops in White River, sees this bear, and purchases it in this tiny, tiny town just north of Lake Superior. So there's a huge statue on the highway of Winnie the Pooh. So people driving through, they're like, why is there this huge statue of Winnie the Pooh? Well, let me tell you. And so that's where I spend my summers as a kid and try to get back there every year as well, because that's where my dad and his family grew up. So back to Uncle Brian, we have this camp. It was my father, or my grandfather, he was this guy that watched out for forest fires and did weather reports and this sort of thing. And so there's this hill near Tukini Lake that he would go up and do fire watch and this sort of thing. And so the camp, it's maybe like 4 of these tables together. It's quite tiny. And he says, we need an upright piano at Tukini Lake Camp. Now, what I haven't told you is the only way to get to this cottage, it's really just a tiny square box. is by boat, is by water. And so I'm like, well, this is going to be awesome. So I tell my husband, right, who's the exact opposite of me. He's kind, he's humble, he's a thinker, he like processes things and thinks before he speaks, like totally opposite, right? And I tell him, like, Uncle Brian has this great idea. We're gonna bring a piano to Tukani Lake Camp. What? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How is it? I mean, the piano could fall in the lake. This could happen, blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, but either way, it's going to be a great story, isn't it? Like, if it falls in the lake, great. If it doesn't, great. It's going to be amazing. And so I have faith in Uncle Brian, right? Because when he has a plan, he's going to figure it out. He's going to make it happen. And so this is what he did. He did some work for a lady. Most people are trying to get rid of their upright grand pianos, right? Not a lot of people want them, so that was easy to acquire. He gets this piano. Then he builds a dock, right? He's like, we need a new dock. We're like, oh, of course we do. So he builds this dock. Then he gets old, like, firefighting hose and uses it to strap the piano to the dock, drills it in. We have this really old rickety boat with a 9-horse motor. He hooks it up to the dock, okay? And pulls it across the lake while my baby boys are playing their piano songs. His wife, hunched over, and she plays the hymn that's played on the Titanic. She's like, did you get it? I'm like, oh, I got it. And that's what happened. And so he's this guy that makes stuff happen. He has the craziest stories. I probably shouldn't share this one, but he once paddled a taxidermied polar bear across the St. Mary's River because it's illegal to bring it into the States. He'll do anything. And so when I think of him as a leader, he inspires greatness. He believes in his people. And when I was at his place for Aunt Barb's 90th birthday, I was snooping around his home, and he had this paper laid out. Okay, so keep in mind he would have been, 78 or something like that. And I looked down at this paper, and it was his list of songs to get these children pumped up before their ski race, because he's, at the time, was teaching 7, 8, 9-year-old kids how to ski race. Mumford & Sons was the first one on the list. I'm like, yes, Uncle Brian, yes, you've got it. So it's to stay current, right? And to inspire greatness, and maybe be a bit wild. We can't talk about people and processes without bringing in our good old friend, Brené Brown. So many of you have probably seen her, this little cartoon video on empathy and sympathy. She talks about how empathy is building connection where sympathy drives disconnection. You'll find it on YouTube. It's about 2.5 minutes long and will change your life. She says, so often we think we're giving empathy, but what we're actually delivering is sympathy with phrases like, well, at least, right? She gives the example, John's getting kicked out of school. Well, at least Sarah's an A student, right? And goes through all of these different difficulties that we go through in life. And perhaps because we're trying to preserve ourselves, to say, gosh, if I empathize with someone, I'm actually going to have to feel maybe something difficult, right? Something that's uncomfortable. And dealing with the humans, we deal with a lot of uncomfortable things. So this quote here, the heart of leadership is connection, and connection is about empathy, curiosity, and emotional courage. I think about how many times I've been in workplaces where that emotional courage is stifled, where connecting with the humans makes us vulnerable or uncomfortable, right? And that's what brings us to the F word. It's a challenging one. Feelings, right? Talking about our feelings. I wish you were all with me. I could put you in my pocket. I was at this workplace where they do a lot of dangerous work. Okay, so it's pretty serious, concerned eyebrows kind of stuff, because they're working with lava every day. And my role that day was to talk about problem solving. And one of those really cool techniques is the 6 hats thinking from Edward de Bono. And 6 hats is really perspective building. It says, get outside of your natural way of thinking. I'm a what could possibly go wrong. I told you about my husband, he's opposite. So he's like this, what could possibly go wrong, right? Totally the same words, but totally different meaning. where I work on feeling and intuition, he's like, well, we need to separate out the facts here, right? And all of that's good. And so that's what the 6 hats is. It's about different perspectives, different ways of viewing these problems. And I get to the red hat of feelings, emotion, gut, intuition, all of those things. And in the front row, okay, was this worker guy right in the middle. And you know when somebody's getting irritated, or my language is pinched? I could tell I had pinched him pretty hard because there was this eruption I could feel coming. His face like started to like boil up, like literally turning color, turning red. And I'm like, he's gonna blow. And then he did. And he started yelling and just freaking out. And I'm trying not to laugh, right? Because he says, we don't have time for feelings in the workplace. There are no feelings in the workplace. Like, just totally lost it. Well, the 2 guys on either side, you can see their shoulders are like this. They're trying not to laugh either because there are so many feelings about there not being feelings, right? And so if we can acknowledge that people have feelings, I think that's important. The trick is not to live in feelings. Feelings can cloud our judgment. Feelings can slow us down in our problem solving. And although they are important to acknowledge, because according to Edward de Bono and his 6 hats, it's one of the things we have to look at when we're solving problems. But if we only are acting on feelings, might lose credibility, might not make the best decisions, because I know in my body, that doesn't always go well when I only use my heart. This is my dad, just joking. It's Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman, this is one of my favorite quotes. I carry it with me every day. I try to sneak it into like most conversations, right? He says, the emotional brain responds to an event more quickly than the thinking brain. I'm leaving it up here for you to like read in your own words and language and voice. I want you to think about it. The last time you were in a workplace and there was a pinch. Somebody said something. There was something that bothered you. How did it feel? Not so great, right? We responded emotionally first. I guarantee it. I know it's true in this body, and I've seen it happen. And it wasn't that long ago, I got this sweet deal on a paddleboard. I'm a water baby. And I took this paddleboard up to the lake past Grand Beach with 2 of my kids, my sister-in-law and her daughter. And I want you to get a good visual here of this truck that I'm driving, because it was one of the hard-bottom paddleboards, not a pump-up one. So my father-in-law is a mechanic. He always finds sweet deals. And this sweet deal was an old City of Winnipeg asphalting truck, complete with asphalt still caked in the back. It's an extended box. It's 4-door. The thing is like driving 2 couches down the highway. And there's a yellow light still attached, which sometimes gets turned on when I pick my daughter up from the middle school, in which she says, I will walk the 10 kilometers home if you are taking the truck to come and get me. Anyway, so this is what we're driving. And I get to the lake and we're having a great day. And then I remember that my husband, he's used to a lot of disappointment being married to me. But he really wanted the truck at 6 o'clock because we heat our house with wood. And a neighbor said, I've got this huge stack of dry logs. Do you want it? You just have to come pick it up. Yeah, definitely. Save ourselves a few hundreds there. And so I said, no problem. I'll have the truck home in plenty of time. Foreshadowing, anybody? So we're at the beach, it's 5 o'clock, and I'm like, holy crap, it's 5 o'clock, I've got to go. And I turn to my sister-in-law and I say, we've got to go. And she's like, no problem. I'm just going to finish my sandwich. I know what that means because she's one of the slowest people I've ever met. She moves through life at such an amazing rate. I learn so much every time I'm with her. Wow, look at this. Look at the colors. Like anything is just magical. So she opens her sandwich like this. I told you my land is speed, right? So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like lose it. So I say, you know what? Yeah, you have your sandwich. I'm just gonna pack up everything and the children and we'll be in the truck waiting. Okay, oh look, there's a bird. Right? Like this is just her, I love it. And so I'm booting it down the highway. I still have to drop her off. I get home, I'm peeling in to our driveway. There's rocks, gravel flying everywhere, and I jump out of the truck because I can see my person pacing, going back and forth, back. And I can tell he's enraged. And this is him really angry at me. Have you seen the hitch? The hitch. Oh my gosh, so I had to take the truck and the trailer apart because I had a flat tire in my car and I had to go to the city. So I remember taking the pin out of the hitch. And if you know anything about pins and hitches, those guys have to stay together, right? And so he's holding the pin and I'm like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what happened. I peeled out of the driveway 4 days ago and that thing went flying, right? And so he's like, nostril flare. Emotional brain. Keep in mind, I've had an hour now to think about how I'm late, and now I've added another layer that I've disappointed my person, again, and now I've lost a really key piece for our evening activity. And so, still in my wet cheetah print bathing suit, I turned to him, because emotional brain's giving me the best information ever, and said, why don't you take your car, take your chainsaw, I'm just going to wander up and down this 100-kilometer highway, find the hitch, and I'll meet you in 5 minutes. And because he's enraged, right? This is him so angry, he's like, okay. Right? Like, first off, he's now like, oh my gosh, my wife is gorgeous and brilliant. Like, who am I? And so he takes off in his little tiny blue car, and I'm literally, you guys, remember, still in my wet cheetah print bathing suit. I have my foot hoisted above the ditch. I'm about to step in, and thinking brain, who's been like, hello, I have some ideas. Thinking brain finally says, you're not gonna find it. What do you mean I'm not gonna find it? Of course I'm gonna find it. It's shiny, it's brand new. I just had it the other day. It's shiny. It's brand new. It's gone. What do you mean it's gone? Of course it's not gone. I'm just going to wander up and down this highway. Yeah, no. What am I going to do? I need to bring the truck and the trailer over there. I promised I'd bring it. I brought, like emotional brain does this really fast spinning, not so great information. Thinking brain's like, you're going to go to Selkirk. You're going to buy a new one. How am I ever going to afford this? I don't have any money. I don't have any money. We weren't planning on buying a new hitch. Visa, right? Like this whole time, emotional brain's spinning because it's responded first, giving us great ideas, and thinking brain's like, boom, bullet point, great ideas, right? And so we think about this in the workplace. We end up with pinches. We end up with disappointment. We end up with people who have, chins hanging down because, and I said chins, all of them, hanging down because they don't feel supported, because their leader responded in a really emotional way instead of taking 5 seconds, walking around the block, and coming back. Or journaling, right? Like all of these things. So it brings us to emotional intelligence. I know we hear about it, we talk about it, but I wanted to just quickly bring in these 5 points. The first one is self-awareness. How do we get to understanding ourselves if we don't understand ourselves? Self-awareness is one of these ones we can probably all work on, and I find every time I point a finger outward to blame somebody, this invisible mirror pops up, it goes, and it has like a finger pointing, and it says, you're the problem. It's actually you, right? You're the one that's causing this issue. So our self-awareness, it needs to be there, and it requires us to slow down. So I have this survey I bring when I'm sharing emotional intelligence in a workplace, and statement number 6, I told you I'm not a details person, but I do remember statement number 6. It says, I know when I am happy. I'm a speed person. I'm rolling through this thing. I'm at a seminar with other humans. Sometimes I do the activities along with the people. Sometimes I scroll Instagram. It just depends the day. In this case, I was doing it and I got to statement 6 and I had to stop and I went, oh my gosh, do I not know when I'm happy? Okay, wait a minute. If I don't know when I'm happy, do I know when I'm sad, angry, hangry, upset, tired, stressed, anxious? Because sometimes those guys all show up in the same way in my body, right? So I really stumped. I think I gave myself a 3 out of 5. And then I asked the team afterwards, I said, hey, did anybody have any challenges with like statement number 6? And they're all like, no. I'm like, uh-oh, like I've got a problem, right? And they said, every single one, 8 people said, because I know when I'm sad. Okay, I don't know about you, but I'm a bit more complicated than happy and sad, right? And the question doesn't say I know when I'm sad. It says, do I know when I'm happy? So if I don't know when I'm happy, is it possible? And the answer to is it possible is always yes, by the way. Is it possible that I'm not really as in tune with myself and my self-awareness as I thought? And so thankfully I have people that are around me that help me with this, including my son, who was 16 at the time. He came up to me, it was about 9 o'clock at night, and he's a touchy-feely baby, I just love it. He starts rubbing my back, and he said, Mom, I think it might be your bedtime, which you know what that means. So I say, oh, am I being a bit grouchy? He's like, well, I think maybe it's just that you're tired. Yeah, that's all. Whereas my daughter, totally different communication style, would be like, listen, get to bed, right? She's 14 and runs our house, so there's that. Challenging times, my friends. So if we don't know self-awareness, how do we get to self-regulation? Leaders that lack self-regulations, they're like the 2-year-old toddler, and we have to like pop the popcorn, put our feet up, and watch them explode and rant and rave, right? They lack self-regulation. So these are the ones that are attacking, really lacking that emotional intelligence and how to connect with humans, and then eventually may say sorry, but most likely not, because it wasn't their fault, which fault is a weird word and really should be left for like geographical things like the San Andreas Fault, right? Pointing fault at people. Leaders that are looking for fault, they're focused on the wrong thing. In that case, they're focused on the people and not the process. Because there's a really good chance that the process is flawed, old, stale, dusty, dirty, and it's not really the people. Is it that you maybe have not very good tools? Is it that your resources are kind of weak? That's possible. Then internal motivation. Talked about Uncle Brian. What a character, I'm serious. He skis in his jeans, his big mitts, right? And a hoodie. This is this guy's character. Internal motivation, nobody's telling him to do, he does has many reps as his age for, lifting weights. He's 87. Just saying. So I think of people that are motivated. I had a leader come to me, she's like, Kerry, how do I motivate my team? Like, I got some good news and bad news. You can't. We can't motivate people. Remember that whole, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink? The same thing with our team. We can create an environment of learning, of curiosity, of resource, and all of this awesome stuff. We can't motivate them. So that's the good news and the bad news, right? So that is an inside job, which I'll circle back to Daniel Pink, the surprising truth about what motivates us. If people are at your workplace and saying, I'm motivated by my paycheck and taking time off, they're probably not gonna stick around. And maybe we don't want them to anyway, right? Because they haven't found what truly motivates them. I remember asking a team, I said, it gives me a lot of information when you tell me what you love about your job, okay? If I come into your workplace and I'm like, hey, what do you love about your job? You're essentially telling me your communication style and everything about you with that one question. I really like problem solving. Okay, so you're the nerd of the group. This is awesome, right? We need these thinkers. Oh man, I love my coworkers. I love solving problems, like I said. I just like getting the work done and seeing how much I can get done in a day. I like the challenge of a workplace. I'm like, okay, check, put you over here, right? And so this idea of motivation, this group, there were about 5, we were going in a circle, and the first 5 people said, oh, I like getting paid, I like taking vacation. Oh, that was funny, that's what I'm gonna say, right? And we went around and I went, okay, wait, newsflash. You get paid at other jobs. You get vacation or vacation pay at other jobs. So let's dig a little deeper, right? I was kind of grouchy that day, I guess. Where was my son? Empathy, we've covered this hugely, right? It's an entire characteristic of emotional intelligence. Connection, that's really what it is, building connection with the people. Without it, good luck, right? And then our social radar. Social intelligence, I think of SI as looking outward. How do I fit in? How do I create ease for other people, right? That whole civility thing. And it's actually a responsibility as a leader to ease the experience of others through restraint, through kindness, through non-judgment, right? And so this social radar is so key. We think about EI, that's our internal stuff. We can define emotional intelligence as our ability to recognize what we're feeling and what it means, and to maybe have an idea of what you're going through. But the truth is, I'm not in your body, so I don't really know what you're experiencing, right? We're only left with what we can see and feel and experience from other people. So if we can divide it up, we look at this process and people, we have facts and we have feelings, which I would call management and leadership. And so I'll blast through all of these. Look at this list though. This is my favorite. Are we lighting a fire under people, or are we stoking the fire within? And the truth is, we might have to do a little of both. Are we solely doing written communications? It literally breaks my heart when I go into a workplace and they say, well, we only communicate by email because we need a paper trail. You're telling me a lot with these little tidbits. Standardization versus innovation. We know that both of these are important, right? Both sides, head and heart. How about both of them together? And when we think about this is Ken Blanchard. He says the key to successful leadership today is influence, not authority. So that authority part gives us an understanding of how we work through our processes, our rules, our regulations, all of that sort of thing. But then we consider our ability to influence others. Oh, stand by. No, this. Oh, come on, everybody. There it is. I was recently in a training, and the question was asked, does intention matter? And that's what I thought. Of course it does. And then I thought about it in the workplace. I meant to get the report done on time. I meant to call back our client. And I think intention does matter, but we don't always know what people's intention are. And sometimes that intention only matters because I'm seeking forgiveness because I screwed something up. So it wasn't my intention to offend, but, right? And so we don't know what's happening, right? That's people's thoughts, their intention, and it's not known by other people. Our feelings, their feelings, right? We all have them. I don't know what it's like to be in your body, like I just said. So I don't really know what you're feeling. I can tell by your body language that you're triggered. I've said something that bothered you, and by the way, my tell is a fist. Do I sound angry? No, but can you look at your hand? Oh, okay. So our impact, and it's not necessarily what we're saying, but how we're saying it. So think about that. Your words, tone, and body language, it's not what? It's not the words. Are you saying words aren't important? No, I'm saying they're super important. But how we say it, our tone, our body language makes up 93% of our message. So next time, check yourself, right? No, this is where we want to land today. This is where I'm so glad we got to. It's my favorite quote of all time from Daniel Goleman. And if you remember nothing else from our time together, I hope it would be this. If your emotional abilities aren't in hand, if you don't have self-awareness, if you are not able to manage your distressing emotions, if you can't have empathy and have effective relationships, then no matter how smart you are, you're not going to get very far. One more thing about my soft-bellied son. He came home at 9 years of age, threw his backpack across the kitchen floor and was angry. Now, this isn't normal behavior from this baby. And I looked at him, I said, hey, are you okay? He's like, I'm just really mad right now. He's got these glasses like this, right? I'm just really mad. I said, okay, well, what happened? He's like, I'm mad at the kids on the bus. I'm like, well, what did the kids on the bus do? The kids on the bus are calling other kids the G word and the R word. I had to start at A. I like went through like all the swears I know. Like I went from A to B. I'm like, no, those weren't the ones. And I'll tell you these words so you have an idea of what he was talking about. G is gay and R is retarded. So those aren't words that we really use like that in our home. And he said, I'm just really mad at those kids that we're calling those kids those things. I said, oh yeah, I could see that. And then I watched him. I was quiet, which you can imagine was difficult. I think I might know why they do those things. I'm like, okay. It's like, I bet they don't know anybody who are those things, and we do. His empathy for the bully flipped. He did a 180 of curiosity, of understanding, and possibility thinking. And so the invitation today is to include the phrase, is it possible, when you come across those pinches in the workplace? Is it possible that our policies and procedures are outdated? Is it possible that our people who are normally really awesome but seem kind of crabby, is it possible that they're going through something? Have they been up all night with a sick kid, a dying parent, their own pain? Those things are all possible. And so I thank you for your time. Before we go, I have a box that if you have a business card or like a piece of paper with your name and phone number, if you want to put it in there, I'm going to do a draw. I'm offering a half-day workplace session with you and your team, and we can talk about what topic would be the most appropriate thing for your people. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for being such a fun audience.